Okay, guys, so welcome to Inside Out by Creative Jungl, where we break down the real issues and challenges faced by creative entrepreneurs. The aim of this show is to sort of remove all of that headline nonsense and kind of get to the core of the issues that we really face as business owners. Now, today I have the pleasure, rather, of being joined by a serial entrepreneur who's built businesses in everything from sort of telecoms to eyewear, and most recently has set out to challenge the business of sustainable technology through his newest venture named Klyk. Now, this idea of sort of sustainability and circular economy is something which we're really used to hearing about within the fashion space, but not necessarily within the technology space. For the most part, technology, I feel anyway, technology firms, they benefit from a lot of positive connotations, obviously notwithstanding data and privacy issues. But sort of tech startups and things like that, they really benefit from being like this tech for good almost. Now, today's guest is really focused on pulling back that layer and showcasing how many problems actually exist when it comes to sustainability within tech and the sorts of issues that arise for, I guess, the planet in general every time you think about purchasing a new iPhone. Now, he's also going to share with you exactly how you can start thinking about new business models within this circular and sustainability lens. So without further ado, I feel like I've said a lot here. I'd like to welcome Asad Hamir. Asad, welcome and thanks a lot for being here.
No, it's my real pleasure. Real pleasure to talk about this.
Awesome.
So shall I start off by introducing myself, I guess?
I think that would be best, yeah. So why don't you fill in any of the blanks which I've probably missed?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I'm an optometrist by trade. So normally have lots of quite cool glasses around me. So did my degree at university, but when I was growing up, my dad would always surround us with technology. So I always had this kind of curious technology mind. And then during my third year at university, I saw the iPhone launch, which Steve Jobs, still remember, was in the canteen somewhere watching it. And that kind of drew me. I used to buy and sell phones and trade phones in university. And that kind of drew me to the telecoms arena. So I did my optometry degree, finished my pre-registration, and then started a telecoms business pretty much straight from university. So back in 2008, we sold iPhone 3Gs, if anyone remembers.
Right.
And I kind of rode that wave for 10 years. I still have that business. And then that business was mainly consumer facing, so we didn't really do much B2B. And as we were growing, and where the idea for Klyk came from, we would always be bringing on new staff. And I was in the office one day, and actually we had 3 members of staff that we brought on that we recruited for when we paid recruitment fees for, paid like £4,000 in recruitment, brought on new laptops and phones. So overall, the expense was like 10K per person almost. And a few of them had left within like 3-4 weeks. And I was like, the laptops were sitting on the table, the phones were sitting there, and I was like, why are we buying stuff in this way? And is there a better way of doing this for businesses? And are other businesses, do they have the same problem? And I guess being in business for a while, you start to get curious about these things and start asking questions to other people. So it's actually a cost that drove me to think about a sustainable business. So then I started to come across like refurbished tech. And so when it came to the next employees, I said, right, instead of us buying new stuff, go and buy it off like eBay. And we ended up buying some MacBooks off eBay and some phones and stuff. And actually one of the MacBooks went wrong. We had a battery problem, and then the seller, wouldn't help us. And I was like, Jesus, how do businesses do this today? Firstly, they're probably just all buying new stuff, and speaking to like fellow entrepreneurs and business owners, they were doing that. When it came to buying refurbished, the options were so limited, and there was no one really providing the service. So I kind of with my problem solving mindset was like, okay, no one's looking at this kind of refurbished space.
Yeah.
And the beauty of technology, especially with Apple over the years, is they've built better and better stuff which lasts longer and longer. And they've almost created their own problem, because actually people hold on to a phone or a laptop for 3-4 years or whatever it is. And so I felt that, you know, if we could provide a remanufactured stroke refurbished product to businesses where they had the assurity that things wouldn't go wrong and they were getting stuff at the right price. Business owners want to ultimately save money, but at the same time want to keep their teams technology enabled. And that was the very early idea behind Klyk. And then I guess as I've got older, like I'm now 35, you know, I've got kids and started to think about more about sustainability. You know, I've done all the kind of, you know, the fasting, you know, the intermittent fasting. Today I'm fasting because of Ramadan, and, you know, considered being vegan and all that kind of stuff. Started to then look into under the bonnet, and it hadn't occurred to me over the years, like having sold so many phones. I mean, I've sold in like 1 million plus phones, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's probably 1.5 million phones. It didn't ever occur to me that tech could be so wasteful and toxic. And then started looking under the bonnet, and there's a lot of stuff around electronic waste starting to come through. Not in the same way as, I guess, water bottles in the ocean and all that kind of stuff. But technology is so wasteful mainly in how it's produced, because if you think of the amount of materials you may have heard about, like gold being in iPhones, and there's actually 30 elements from the periodic table that are actually in your smartphone. And, you know, a lot of that stuff is extracted from third world countries at war, you know, and so all of that kind of imbued energy that it takes to kind of extract this stuff and then bring all those raw materials back to China, where it's all produced. And then I don't know if you've ever broken one of your phones before.
I literally just broke my phone screen 2 days ago, and it's the first
oh my God,
ever broken in
right
10 plus years of having a smartphone.
So perfect example to talk about this, because, like, you know, to repair it, it's so difficult, right? And you know, you'll go take it to a repair shop and they'll say, if it's like an iPhone 11 or an XS, it'll be like 200-300 pounds. And it's not because they're making massive margins. It's just the process that it takes to actually repair this stuff means that it sometimes starts to be your thought process almost goes through, should I just go and buy a new one instead of trying to repair this? So, you know, started to look under the bonnet of the electronics world and realized that electronics doesn't want you to actually keep hold of your products. They actually want you to keep throwing them away after 2-3 years, and then you know, after that buying new ones. So I could tell that, I could see there was a lot of refurbished stock in the market, and so connecting the two worlds together, I really wanted to bring a more sustainable alternative to business owners, which wasn't widely available today. So today, right now, if you want to go and buy refurbished MacBooks or phones or tablets or whatever, yes, there are websites where you can buy ones and twos and things like that, but no one's providing that holistic experience for a business to think more sustainably. So that's what we're trying to do with Klyk, and the numbers are staggering. I mean, to give you an idea, we just did a deal for 3 MacBooks yesterday, refurbished, and that business has saved over a ton of carbon. And we've offset that. So what we do as well is we offset the carbon for them. So just to because if I said to you a ton of carbon, it doesn't really.
That was going to be my question. Just give some color around that, what that actually means for someone, because I think just a ton in any sort of idea, it already sounds a lot, but just kind of give some context around that for the audience.
Yeah, so to give you an idea, it's around about 8 trees that we plant. So and for every customer that buys refurbished, what we also do, we work with our partner Offset Earth, and we offset the equivalent amount of carbon that they would have earned by buying new. So in this example, it would have been a ton of carbon if they had bought new devices, and so therefore we planted 8 trees for the customer. And so from that perspective, they've got that there. You know, it's really important you humanize like the impact that this stuff has. Sorry, you're going to say something?
No, so it's more about the calculation around that ton. So is it more about, if we say for my business, we went out and we purchased 3 MacBooks from the Apple stores, would that calculate just the carbon that's created in the manufacture of those MacBooks, or in sort of our travel costs and everything? How does it kind of work out for a business?
So as with a lot of products, and even more so with technology because of how complex it is and the processes that go into it, about 80% of the lifetime carbon output, and in some cases 85%, is actually comes from the manufacturing process.
Okay.
So because these products are actually so efficient these days, like, you'll see on the Apple keynotes, Tim Cook going on about, how energy efficient things are, and they're really energy efficient, which means that actually very little carbon goes towards the actual running of these devices. So the majority comes in the manufacturing, and actually most of it comes even before it goes to the factory. It's the extraction of the materials.
So the mining, everything like that.
Mining the materials, all that kind of stuff. And there's some under the bonnet, there's also like some other elements, like there are countries in the world which are at war because of the materials that, the likes of Apple and Samsung benefit from. Now, most recently, Apple and Samsung have pulled out of those particular countries from extracting their materials, and they're moving more towards recycled materials. So already these larger companies are starting to make some of these changes. And ultimately, also what I saw, and everyone, will, and I'm sure is the same, we're all starting to be a lot more sustainable, and we're a lot more ethically minded. And often, I've bought some fashion sustainable products recently, and the challenge in fashion is it's more expensive to buy this stuff sometimes. Whereas in tech, it's almost easier because it's cheaper, and in some cases, businesses can save 50 to 60%.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that this whole idea kind of birthed from a real life theme or real life problem rather for yourself as a business owner, because I can empathize with that, because I know every single time we onboard someone new into our business as a video agency, they're required to have a laptop, a camera, tripod, hard drives, all sorts of stuff. And like sometimes, for example, a real big expense for us when I was just looking at it previously a couple of weeks back is hard drives. We purchase so many hard drives.
We want to touch people like you, and it's about getting everyone to start thinking like this. And it may be that you bought that MacBook, we're having this conversation now, and now you're starting to think about your next hard drive or your camera or whatever it is. And it doesn't matter if you buy it off us and whatever, but it's a question. The idea is to just get people to start thinking about it, because like you, or like a lot of people, I was the same. I didn't know that tech had that big of a carbon footprint. But if you think about certain things, like when Apple makes a phone, everything's air freighted across. So even that kind of the kind of air miles that go into a lot of these products, let alone the manufacturing process and all that kind of stuff. So, but I think an important point to raise is the answer is not in making less technology or trying to use less technology, should I say. Technology is obviously an amazing thing, and it's what's enabling this conversation we're having right now. It's just a question for business owners now, as innovation rates have declined year on year from your last iPhone. I mean, I saw the MacBook Pro 13-inch come out today, and I was trying to compare the differences. I'm like, okay, if I use Final Cut Pro or whatever it is, I might have an increase in the speeds and whatever. But for me, as an everyday user who doesn't do these things, I don't really see the difference. So it's a question to ask business owners: do you see that difference? Is it that important for you to get the newest and the greatest? I think what we're starting to also see is financing. So like just in the same in the car industry, if you go and buy a new car, they give you incentives to buy it new, so increasing the balloon payments or reduced interest rates. I recently bought a car, and Apple is starting to do 0% interest. So there is that friction, unfortunately, that there is always going to be. But I think what there is in our industry and in every industry now is this massive opportunity for reuse, remanufacture. And I just want to touch on one point around, like, especially in photography, having done some photo shoots and things like that. I know that you can now even rent the cameras and video cameras. So, like those £40,000 cameras that you talked about there. I think that rental model, obviously we've seen it Rent the Runway with clothing and stuff, and actually something that we're trying to push in Klyk as well, where you don't need to necessarily own it. Like, especially if you think like COVID now, with people working from home, what's the point of businesses actually buying tech instead of that, rent it for 3 months and then give it back? So there's different models that I think business owners need to start thinking about in terms of moving away from linear systems, linear kind of like just taking stuff from the environment, making things and then selling it, and then going back to the customer after 2-3 years, to actually running almost a full system, a circular system. And it's actually when we were building Klyk, we came across this circular economy, which is not just, it's something which is not just about sustainability, but it's the way in which business owners, I think, need to start thinking. It's about the full service delivery for businesses. And actually, when you start to think about the full journey and what are those full, I like to call it like share of basket that you can sell, then you're much more than just a product or a service provider. You're a full stack, almost full service provider. Right. And that's where I think, that's where I want to take Klyk. I don't want to just sell people refurbished stuff. I want to support their entire journey, but in a more sustainable way.
Okay, so that's looking at it in a very, I guess, a more holistic approach, not only just from your, I guess, ethos and brand, but more from the business model as well, kind of being almost like an Amazon or something. I know Amazon is probably a bad word to use for it, for all their indiscretions, but I think trying to kind of branch out across the whole life cycle.
Because it doesn't put so much pressure on me to make so much margin on one thing. I can spread that out and provide even more value to the customer. Because I think it's really important with us, with sustainability, to be able to show the customer beneficial use cases.
Sure.
Sustainability obviously has this challenge right now where it's very niche, and to get people to mass adopt it, I think people need to see the real benefit day to day. And so the beauty for us is in the cost. So if we can do that across the range and save businesses as we are 50-60%, and then in addition save them tons of carbon, which they can then publicize themselves or tell their employees about, or whatever it is, then that's an even greater benefit. But I think for us, the circular economy really helped us think through this, because circular economy teaches you it's not just about one aspect, it's about the whole system, and it's about thinking through every element of it.
And actually on that point, I kind of want to just kind of, I guess, see how we can apply that to other people who are listening and other entrepreneurs. Like I recently was speaking to my brother about this, and he was looking at sort of B Corp analytics, because it's a new thing which B Corp are trying to push out, so that they can kind of, I guess, provide like an analytics dashboard to different businesses, like different corporates, to get better oversight on, the sustainability analytics. I kind of wanted to know and delve into, what did you have to consider when sort of building out Klyk as a business, which you haven't necessarily had to consider for past businesses? Like, are there some things that you could definitely tell other business builders who are looking at circular economy and things like that to look out for in terms of sort of quick wins to become more sustainable quickly?
Sure. So, I mean, we did some simple things very early on, like we made sure all of our tech was all refurbished, obviously. And I think instilling that mindset in our businesses was really important. And we started to use apps like Karma, where you're buying food for lunch, which is, not secondhand, but, leftover or whatever it is. And, we started to think about sustainability in every aspect, because I think, getting that culture right, as well as the kind of business owner or the leader trying to drive that vision, it's really important. The entire team really. So I think that was really, really important. And I think compared to my previous businesses, where whether it was design or sales or whatever it was, like the vision and where we started from was very different, So at the core of the brand is very much, we want to, advance sustainable technology to businesses in London, so that means not just like selling stuff, it's education, it's inspiring. We have to make sure that we drink our own champagne in that sense. So I think instilling that within people, I think at the same time recruiting people who naturally are passionate about this space, I think is super important, where they come from and, all that kind of stuff. And then I think in terms of, I guess, the business model side of things, it didn't really exist, right? Like, we had to kind of create that. So there's no kind of set pricing in the market. So a big part of that is, I think we had to like almost think about where customers, what price to start charging, where is the real value? What point do people start to feel that there is a considerable difference between buying new and refurbished? And a big part of that is just testing and speaking to meeting customers. We did a 2-month beta before we went live as well. So we didn't just rush into this. And within that beta, we kind of went out to like my network, my business partners network, tried to recruit 40, 50 businesses. And really test the idea in a lot of ways, made sure that, before we kind of launched into this, that people really wanted it, and they were willing to make that switch and that commitment to it. And lo and behold, pretty much everyone that we spoke to really wanted to make the switch to more sustainable alternatives. Obviously, there were some concerns that people had around like, would their tech last, and all that kind of stuff. So, and that, like those concerns that we learned from, we also started to pivot our approach to making sure that we could provide reports on the technology before it goes out, and how sustainable it is, and how reliable it's going to be, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that testing phase is also really, really key. And then what we also learned is people wanted to have like sustainability reports and things like that at the end. So we we now
the process with you guys, or
correct, yeah. So when someone buys off us, we'll do a report for them. Here's the amount of carbon you've saved. This is the amount of money you've saved, and then we also show them like how much we've saved in total, and all that kind of stuff. Because I think it's important for people to not only for themselves, but internally, if they're the office manager or whoever they are, to be able to communicate internally in the business. So a big part of, I think, with this kind of business where you are breaking new ground, it hasn't really been done before. You have to adopt a test and learn approach, and learn along the way. And like every day we're changing and pivoting our approach, to be honest, we're learning. So there's no hard and fast rule. So in my previous businesses, I could maybe kind of pull on previous experience, and that's been one of the challenges here. And I guess as we've gone through and we start to release more and more content also, I think also what's happened is people that have done it maybe in other markets or in other sectors, I've pulled on that experience. So whether it's like someone done a sustainability business in food or fashion, I think that those learnings that you can get from other people are super important.
Okay, so not necessarily any set KPIs that you were trying to hit from the beginning in terms of sustainability, but more, it sounds like there's certain, I guess, mindset things in terms of building that business. You mentioned obviously those reports which your clients were asking for, especially during the beta phase. Do they get any sort of that pass through in terms of being able to then use that for their own marketing or CSR or anything like that?
So
important part of the business model.
Yeah, so we've done we've pulled together like a pretty cool email which they get, and then we've seen a couple of them repost it on different channels. What we haven't probably done yet is kind of gone into giving them some marketing collateral, and that's definitely the kind of next stage, to kind of like help them kind of promote stuff in this way. Because a lot of businesses, especially the ones that have done, like they want to show that they are responsible, and especially in today's age, show that they're for more than just profit. They're there to be businesses for good in the world. And I think, because tech is such an easy way to do it as well, it's a really low hanging fruit for them.
I think when you first mentioned this idea to me, in my head, and I think I even voiced it out loud to you, was that this is such a low hanging fruit for someone like me who, yes, I want to be more sustainable, but sometimes buying the latest like organic cotton t-shirt for £65 just isn't necessarily the easiest option for me. Though I might do it, might not be the easiest route in for me. So
and you can do it in so many different ways. If you need a cable or a charger or whatever it is, like even small things. But I think like anyone looking to or thinking about this in their business, I think the key thing is to test and learn. I think that's just a really important thing, and trying to identify how people are gonna so that this doesn't become too niche. Because to your point around what our aims and objectives are, I really want to turn this into a mass market product and service. I mean, my previous business, I was able to get some scale on it. We got up to about 150,000 customers, and that's the ambition with this, is to get some real scale. I really want every modern business in London, ideally, the top 100, top 200 companies in London to be working with Klyk, because we become the kind of gold standard when it comes to this stuff. That's the ambition. But I think before I can see where we're going and what that opportunity is. Before that, there was a lot of meeting people and understanding and seeing whether or not it resonated with them. It resonated with me, and I thought it did. I thought it would resonate, but I think you've got to just almost talk to people. If I was to speak to you about this beforehand, and seeing that reaction, and it's all you got to add up all those reactions. I think we spoke to probably 70, 80 business owners before we did this.
No, definitely. I think with any business, when you are starting, when it's a new sort of innovative idea, you kind of have to figure out where is the messaging. And I think that's one thing that has really, I guess, stood out to me in terms of what Klyk is doing, the marketing and branding. Inevitably, you pulled that from your experience in your other businesses, but it's incredible. I know you're saying you don't have a lot of content out there, but the content that you do have is already the messaging. You've figured out the right messaging already from right now. And I think that makes a big impact. And do you think, I wanted to kind of ask you about that, because, it would seem on the surface that your main competitors to Klyk would be other sort of leasing businesses, because there's loads of leasing businesses out there, right? But what would you kind of say is your sort of innovation point to make sure that you're not kind of dragged into a price war with these other leasing businesses that might have more scale right now?
I think, so you're absolutely right. There's lots of these kinds of leasing technology businesses out there. And some of them would probably do refurbished stuff and probably go and do that if you ask them to do it.
Yeah.
And I think the key USP for us is to become, that authority in this space, and for us to, really communicate what we're doing, and to inspire other people to do it. And so when people think about sustainability and technology in London, they think about us. And, in terms of the product set and everything that we've got, there probably are people that do different aspects of it, but I think it's the collective of bringing this all together, and the leadership that we can provide and the story that we're going to tell people over a period of time. I think also, to add to this, the service, so that ability to kind of handle everything for the business and take the whole experience and make sure that there's no headaches, and guarantee it. And all that is going to be really, really key, because I think as a business owner, the last thing you want, especially how important your tech is, that things to go wrong. So I think it's going to be not one of these things. We don't have necessarily a piece of IP around a product because we're providing a service. But I think it's going to be the collective of these things, that will hopefully be our differentiator. And because we're the first to kind of to talk about the sustainability kind of messaging in a very clear way, I think hopefully that will cut through once we get out of COVID and people start spending a bit more.
Yeah. So. Well, I think in a way there's an opportunity there, right? Because businesses kind of post-COVID go back to zero-based budgeting, right? And it then all becomes about cost, and you're offering something which is a lower cost.
Yeah.
It's a normal, plus that feel-good factor of, the sustainability topic around it. And I definitely think for me as a business owner, if I was to be approached with that as a proposition, where I have some sort of marketing or CSR play, which I can then also kind of utilize as well in my own messaging, my own business. It's a double win for me across many departments of the business.
I came into creativity quite late. I'm an optometrist, right? I shouldn't be doing creative stuff, right? That's
not true at all. And hence why Creative Jungl exists, because there's so many people who are sort of, I guess, multi-potentialists, I think they call them, people who have many different creative and professional pursuits, and they kind of somehow find a way to merge them all together simultaneously. So I think you present that kind of perfectly.
Yeah, and I really do believe that creative execution and visuals, whether it's visual or copy, is what makes the difference. You don't always need to have that killer differentiator that no one else can have. to really make that difference. I think if you can resonate with people in their hearts and resonate, then with people, in their minds to make that decision, then you stand a really good chance of getting that business. And that's, my first business was a reseller business selling mobile phones. I mean, there were so many people selling mobile phones. I remember my mom saying to me when we were starting the business, like, you're mad. Like, why do you want to start a mobile phone business? Like, you got such a stable career in optics. People buy glasses every day. Phones, there's so many people selling them. How are you going to compete? And I think, it was that sales energy that we always had from the beginning that I guess drove the business.
Right.
And I think it's that same energy that we'll bring into this. And I think in anyone starting a business today, I think you've got to really bring that personal interaction. I think as well as digital being a really important channel, there's no substitute to like just getting out there and speaking to people and network. And I'm finding LinkedIn's amazing. Like, I've never used LinkedIn obviously so much before.
Extremely undervalued. Extremely.
Yeah, like, and it's amazing how if you get your profile page looking good, if you start creating good content, that you start to get more people connecting with you, and when you connect with someone, it's much easier to make that connection and start up a conversation. And then as long as you don't go into it kind of saying, like, I'm Klyk and this is what I offer and blah, 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 and trying to sell to someone. It's like the classic, like, you're in a networking event, you wouldn't walk up to someone and try and sell to them straight away. You'd build a relationship. And so just like with any friendship, you got to like build that relationship and then sell to them. That's the key to LinkedIn, I think.
Yeah. Coming into this again, like, I think, sustainability, circular economy is starting to come into the mainframe of like people's topics, not just for like the eco warriors and, the real hipsters who are really into like that way of thinking. But what are some of the sort of preconceived notions which you've had to kind of face as a business and a business model, and how have you dealt with them?
So there's a few different aspects of the circular economy. So there's obviously the making side of things. So the trying to use materials and make stuff in a way where it lasts. So we don't control that aspect of it. The bit that we do control is the bit once it's made and trying to extend the life of that device. Now, the problem that we've found is that there's a lot of people that have stock in the market. Now, if you imagine, this stock would be used by someone for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years or 3 years, they would sell it on, or it would be leased and they would give it to someone. Now, just like, you would do with a car or something like that, you would normally have that car serviced and made sure that when you sell it on again, that, as a consumer buying that car, that it's going to work. And I've had a bad experience when I bought a car and actually it's been a massive problem with the engine, and I had to then go and have it repaired and blah, blah, blah. Same issue with tech. Someone drops it, spills coffee on it, blah, 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 blah. There's inherent issues with the technology that we need to make sure that things are checked and checked again and checked again. And so we've had those problems in our beta phase where stuff we've bought and then maybe it's not been checked to the extent that, and we've learnt what's important. So that's been a major challenge for us, is then finding that reliability of stock, which is of high quality, and building out the supply chain. And it's actually where content has helped, because as we start to release more content, it's amazing how like you just get people from random places like in the world. Like I had a guy from Netherlands contact me yesterday, another one in Hong Kong contact me. So I've got stock of MacBooks and phones, and we get them from America, blah, blah, blah. So it's amazing how then content can help solve some of these problems and actually start putting stuff out there. So that's we're very much focused on that reuse element. I think the next bit around repair has also been a challenge, because if something does have something wrong with it, then the problem with hardware manufacturers is they don't really allow much flexibility in repairing stuff. So if it's too far gone, it almost then becomes waste. So I think, anyone thinking about circular economy and how you apply it to your industry is think about the bit or the path of least resistance. So for us, we've picked that reuse aspect, because if we can control and test the product
Right.
then we know we can manage that customer experience.
Sure.
And but we're less kind of in the kind of repair side of things. We do repair. We work with partners to do repair, but we know repair is a very challenging market just because of how the manufacturers control the industry.
Sure.
I mean, even recently, Apple have just changed stuff on their latest iPhone 11s, where you have to buy the LCD from Apple. If you buy the LCD from anywhere else, then the PCB recognizes that that part is not an Apple part,
Gosh.
and it basically switches it off.
Wow.
So we've personally stayed away from that repair market because we know how like murky it is. But if you're in fashion or if you're in another industry, like, you know, think about what aspect of that market you can operate in, where the most value is for the customer, and which would be the easiest to operate in. And it's not, the answer is always in the easiest, but especially when you're launching a business, you don't want to start with the most hardest thing. You want to kind of work towards that over time.
So if, say, let's just run a hypothetical scenario here. If we were to purchase a MacBook from you, from Klyk rather, after the 2-year leasing period or whatever it is up, what then happens to that MacBook? What would you do with it?
So what we do, there's two ways you can buy off us. You can either buy with cash or you can buy on a leasing contract. So we would lease it. We encourage people to lease it just because so much tech ends up being in drawers and, you know, just redundant at the end because someone goes and buys something new and then forgets to sell it and blah, blah, blah. So with leasing, we build in a residual value and then we take that kit back and then we can either sell it on again. So we can provide another cycle for it. If it gets to end of life and it's pretty much worthless, there's always someone else out there in the world that would benefit from it. So we work with a few charity partners, whether it's shipping it to East Africa or, you know, other places in the world. And this is the challenge with tech, is so much tech just gets thrown away. There is so much use for it. There's such a big digital divide that exists. I mean, even in the UK, coronavirus has exposed it. So many kids, elderly people that don't have access to technology, not being able to reach their loved ones. Yeah. Think about how big that digital divide is in Africa or, you know, places in the third world. Yeah. It's huge. So I really want to expand that as we grow Klyk.
The idea of keeping it more sustainable, and just by virtue of the travel costs and the shipping costs that would be involved in shipping a laptop and 1,000 laptops to Uganda versus sending them to Shoreditch or sending them somewhere else, you know, wherever in London it might be. So that's really an interesting point. And do you feel then, like with these business models that are coming up in the circular economy, I just kind of want to jump back to that. Do you think that now we're seeing more and more business models which can kind of operate on a profitable basis versus that sort of non-profit status which we've seen for the last decade? You've seen loads
100%.
of good businesses, but they're typically non-profit or, you know, charity-based businesses. Do you feel like the margins and things like that are coming to a point now where you're figuring out, okay, within circular economy, there are some business models which have the potential to scale and be profitable?
Definitely. I think there's two things to this. So the stigma of buying stuff which was secondhand or anything like that, which was there before, is still there, but it's getting less and less. Like if I told my mum to buy like a secondhand piece of clothing, and I asked her about this a few weeks ago, she kind of pulled her face. So I think, you know, I think us younger folk now, we probably are more accepting to it. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Cost is one of them. It's like, you know, the cost benefit. I think the second thing is we know that it's more ethical, more sustainable. So I think in terms of building a business model, it's a lot harder to build a business model when you're selling to a niche audience to selling to an audience which is, you know, much more mass. So now is the perfect time because that audience is growing rapidly to kind of get into this space. 100%, it's a great time to do it. And if you think about it this way, you've got that gap between what it costs full price and then what you can source it at refurbished, and your profits in between, right? Now, of course, you're going to have that that competition in the market, which will drive down your profit. But it's then up to you to market it in the right way and sell it in the right way and get the most value. I don't think you necessarily need to be the cheapest. I think people, when they're buying refurbished, also want quality. They want to know that it works well and it's going to do the job and all that kind of stuff. So whether it's like clothing or like I would really think I haven't bought much secondhand clothing. I bought some glasses that are vintage. And with clothing, I think what's really important is I still want it to feel as new. So I'd want it to be dry cleaned, and I wouldn't want any smells or anything like that. I mean, that would just, those are the things that make me cringe, like thinking about it. So I think it's thinking about those pain points for your industry, and trying to mitigate those pain points to then build that business model.
Okay, awesome. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think like figuring out those pain points, like those small nuances that most consumers would think about, but probably not voice openly. I think kind of figuring those out, like you kind of alluded to it, like in a beta phase, you kind of really work through a lot of those objections just by virtue of being in the arena, so to speak. Like by putting products out there and speaking to your customers face to face, you're kind of able to address some of those challenges and feedback as well at the same time. So just a quick thing, actually, I wanted to kind of get your quick take before we kind of wrap up with sort of 3 key takeaways. Your quick take on, I know you're a big fan of Tesla, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I have a love-hate relationship with my Tesla.
Okay, so we can get into that. We can get into that. But what do you think of like their idea? Elon Musk is really famous for kind of saying like, the typical way that the car industry and the business model of automotive works is that you buy a new car every 4 years, whether it's through finance or whatever. So upgrading the models and the style and everything is super imperative to their business. But he said like, well, we don't need to upgrade the style of the model every 2 years. Or every 3 years, there's just no point. If the Model S looks good or the Model X looks good, it'll look good in 3 years too. Like, why do we need to keep doing this? What do you think of that in terms of a business model, in terms of profitability, and then also just in the way of a circular economy? Like, what's your take on that? Is that more of a PR move, or is it a legit, makes sense?
No, I think there is substance in there, and I think that substance comes in design. So I really believe that in the simplicity of design and design to be timeless. So good design can last a lifetime. Like if you look at Braun and their design ethos from Dieter Rams and how that's inspired Apple. And actually, there's an amazing blog which I'll send through, which has how a lot of Apple's products have been inspired by Dieter Rams, and in some cases actually just copied.
He's the godfather of design.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's some merit in what Elon Musk is saying around design can be timeless. I'm not 100% sure, if I'm honest. I agree with him around the Model X with its Falcon doors being timeless, or the designs of those cars. But I can see where his mind's at. I think where he's also thinking is the car being a service almost. You're buying a service, and and it's about removing those barriers. But I think Tesla probably have some way to go to get to that point. And I think ultimately people still want that element of newness with a car. And I think the challenge for Tesla would be is how do you create the business model if you want people to not buy a car every 3-4 years. So maybe we'll start to see more of a leasing arrangement with cars over time, and especially with autonomous cars, right, coming through. I mean, that's going to happen. Yeah, that's not far off now. With 5G infrastructure, very much almost there. Within the next year or two, we'll have 5G across the UK. At that point, why can't you have autonomous cars? I think that will happen. So I think that whole car industry space is going to change radically.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So finally, then, to wrap up, I'm a budding entrepreneur in the circular economy or sustainability space. Looking at a variety of business models, what would be your three key takeaways from today's discussion, or just generally, that you think are the most sort of salient points of advice that you would give to other people who are kind of entering this space?
So the first thing I would say is really do your research, really spend time thinking about the market and understanding your customer and what the pain point that you want to go after. Don't go after all of them because there's a lot of them. So with ours, it could have been repair, recycle, reuse, blah, 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 blah. I think it's really establishing what's that key aspect of the market you're going to go after where there's very little competition. The beauty of sustainable, circular, refurbished, reuse models today, there ain't a lot of competition in any market, to be honest. Fashion probably is the one which has become quite saturated now with sustainable brands. But in other industries, there's not a lot of competition. You could probably pick up other different types of products, take video products, video editing products, and start renting stuff out as opposed to buying stuff, to video editors, and I don't know, like start to create a business model off that. So that's the kind of first thing, establishing, and doing your research, identifying the customer, how big the opportunity is, and picking one area and then building out from that. I think I'd say that's the kind of first one. The second one is really making sure that the back end infrastructure is in place before you start to scale the business. So when it came to us with some of our problems early doors with devices that weren't quite right, make sure the testing was in place and all that kind of stuff. So making sure all of that stuff, so that when you do start to scale the business, you're not fighting fires. I'm sure we've all been there, like fighting fires, the last thing you want to do. And then the third thing I'd say is think, and we haven't really covered this today, but I just want to delve on it just quickly now. Think digitally with your approach, because your customer is going to be digital with their content. We've touched on obviously LinkedIn and everything, but I think from a communications perspective, thinking how you can reach that customer in a digital way, but at the same time not forgetting the physical interaction with people. I remember this amazing phrase which I've heard recently, which is, you can't be what you can't see. So you can spend ages trying to build the perfect website and build the perfect solution and service and stuff like that, but sometimes also you just need to get out there and just start telling people about it and be faster than anyone. There is that famous phrase from the tech industry, is it fail fast or fail fast and break stuff or whatever it is. So I think, at this early stage in a startup as we are, we've only 4 or 5 weeks into the business. We're just trying stuff every day, and I think when you're in this space, I think you've got to adopt that mindset. You've got to be faster than anyone. You've got to just get stuff out there, do things, and try and just connect with as many people as possible. I think that's the key thing right now for us, because no one knows, or not many people know about sustainable technology. So for us, it's about just spreading the message as far and wide as possible.
Okay, awesome. And for me then, if I'm an existing business owner, if I wanted to become more sustainable in my business model, what would be the easy things you would suggest that I look at right out of the gate?
So with your business model, I would say if you don't adopt a reuse model, so if you're selling a product and you don't adopt a reuse model, think about how you can adopt refurbished or alternative of that. If you're a service-based business, then thinking about every aspect of that service and how you can reduce those costs, I think is key. And the beauty of it is, if you can reduce those costs, you're more profitable, but also you can market it as more sustainable. So I think there's that aspect of it. I think implementing policies internally in your business that you get that buy-in of your employees, so that they are thinking more sustainably as a business. The sustainable practices you should be then externally communicating, because everything's all about marketing. So if you're doing stuff internally in your business, market that, because that stuff people will buy into. People want to buy into businesses which are for good. So, those things I would say are the kind of small things to just start off with. Start thinking about the small things you can introduce, whether it's internally or externally, and then build out from there.
Okay, awesome. That sounds awesome. Listen, Asad, thank you very much for your time. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation, actually. And
Pleasure.
definitely making me kind of reconsider a few things that I've been thinking about in terms of purchases for the business. But yeah, is there anywhere where the audience can kind of find you? I know you're hosting a really great sort of webinar series called Tea and Tech. Um, I'm not sure that it's a regular programming just yet, but I know you have them going on all the time. But is there anywhere else that the audience can connect with you and hear more about Klyk and the circular economy?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, first of all, just like LinkedIn, feel free to connect with me if you've got any questions. Sure, if they, any questions come through to you, Viren, then pass them over. LinkedIn, Instagram, LinkedIn, Asad Hamir, Instagram, Asad Hamir, all one word. The Klyk website is www.helloklyk.com. And the same again on LinkedIn, just search for Klyk, and the same thing on Instagram. But yeah, feel free to follow us. More than happy to help as well. So if any of your kind of listeners need any help in terms of starting this kind of business, we've obviously been through that pain, so we understand how it all works. So it's always better to learn from other people's mistakes. So feel free to reach out.
Definitely, awesome. Thank you very much, Asad, for your time. And
thank you.
we'll stop there.
Thanks.